Good evening. Thank you for the honor of being here. This is a very important workshop, and it's wonderful to come and share ideas from around the world and to hear your ideas on how we can make a city that is equitable and open and caring across the board. So I am from Johannesburg. The students from the workshop I'm in will have seen the next few slides, but I think for the benefit of the audience, I just have a few ideas on Joburg. So Joburg is a place with many names. This is a survey that we did where we found out from people throughout the city what they call their city, and you can see there's all sorts of ideas. It's a city with many cultures, many ideas, and we hope to use those ideas to fuel the city of the future. So 2610 South, where I work, we are named after the latitude of Johannesburg. Just quickly, how we work, we try and add value to everything we do. Why do we do this? Because as you can see, this is a pool of needs, and these are the real needs, and generally as architects, this is what we address. The firm that I work at, 2610, was founded by Thorsten and Anna Graupner in 2004. I joined there in 2012 at a time where we were looking at how we could diversify our development of ideas, so that we work across 4 fields: knowledge management, research, so we do a lot of teaching and run a lot of workshops with students to generate concepts around the city. We work in the field of architecture, buildings, urban design, and we are moving into a realm of looking at how we can work with properties and economies within properties. So this is the diagram of the city of the South African city. It is a seminal diagram that shows how the city is subdivided across racial and economic income lines. It's a process that was implemented in South Africa under apartheid from the 1950s, and it has left many scars that carry on till today. This is a context that we live in. It's a harsh environment. It's harsh for its informality, and it's harsh for what is perceived as the formal. But it is a place where, under the idea of occupying memory, that we inhabit the real world, we inhabit the brutal, and we make something beautiful from what is, rather than trying to destroy and rebuild, that we make ourselves from within, from our roots. So this is just a short. So this is a video of a space. It used to be a theater. The government and the planning officials in Johannesburg have built an enormous square, Walter Sisulu Square, very near this space, but it remains empty, it remains unused. And just around the corner there is the old theater, and we were, as a company, we were asked to look at putting on a production in the area, and in working with communities, with the community in this area, Kliptown, we discovered that there is a strong culture many years after of the theatre still being a place of production. So this is a dance that we produced with the community in a space that is perceived to be abandoned, but actually contains a life and a continuous remaking of the traces of its memory. So tonight I am going to take you through four projects, three of them built, that deal with inhabiting a memory, and often a dislocated memory within Johannesburg. The first is the Rahima Musa Mother and Child Hospital. It's an extension that was completed in 2015. This is the context in which it exists. So it's a landscape of mine dumps, of industrial buildings, and of relocated populations moved around within the apartheid era. This is the site. It is how do I turn this thing on? This is the site. This whole complex is a hospital. It is completely walled off, secured access. Around the hospital, there are some residential areas here. This area is largely comprised of hostels where working populations from areas around Johannesburg, mostly men, come to work and their families remain behind. And then this area here is a more family-based residential area, but the whole site is cut with tension and violence. There are many many protests along the street from communities around violence and the murder of mothers and children around a mother and child hospital. So this is the original building, built in the early 1900s. It has a certain logic of form in terms of the internal spaces that are where people can meet and gather, and courtyards. This is what the site became over an 80-year period. It is very much an industrial landscape. So we talk about occupying the memory of the industrial landscape and the harshness of the initial image I showed you. This is where our project lies. So the building is funded with donations. It's a project that took many years to realize in terms of the doctors working to try and get this facility built. And so the budget is extremely tight. And our strategy was to take the logic of the original building, the inherent logic, and to copy and paste a building next door. It is obviously a little bit different. It needs to respond to its specific brief, but to treat the central moment of that building as something special, as a space where people gather, meet, and where public culture, public life is celebrated. This is the building going up, and this is the central piece that is the space of gathering. So we worked with a local artist. He has practiced as an architect, but he's now a well-known artist, Lorenzo Nasembeni, to develop a concept for how to resolve the facade of the central building. And we took our clues from the landscape that the building looks onto, from the surrounds. And we traced those back onto the building so that the image seen is the image that makes the building special. It is made from its context and is recognized from that context. These are some of the details that we developed on that facade. And this is Professor Kuvadia. He's the doctor whose project this is. He worked very hard to get the funding for it. And these are some of the details that we resolved with him. So here's the project going up. We worked with a local, this is Lorenzo, the artist, and we worked with a local construction company that specializes in making very meaningful works, very, very, very carefully made buildings. So this is the site, and you can see from this road and from this landscape, there's something special that sits there. This is where the children play and gather, and that's the main meeting area in the middle. And some views out, you can see we have a very golden sunset, and that's the view that you look out to, the view that you saw initially. So what's quite important is that within this landscape, you come around, you find a home, and it's very powerful for us to have to go back there. We go back there every now and then, and everyone is so warm and welcoming and happy and proud of their space, proud of the space that they built, in the sense that it is a project that they funded and worked with us and conceptualized with us. This is some of the interiors, and this woman sitting here, she could be the director of the building. She's one of the cleaners, but she loves what she does. She loves coming here every day. She always hugs me when I arrive, and she's an institution in herself there. And this is some of the workspace in the building. And what is wonderful is the windows and artwork. It's a special moment to work there. The next project's quite difficult. It's a low-cost housing project, Lufring. It was started originally in 2004, before I was involved in it. And it was a plan to develop housing, low-cost housing in South Africa. So this is housing that is subsidized and state-funded and handed over to persons earning less than a certain amount per month. Often, this is the status quo of housing in South Africa, and you can see there are special moments, there are thresholds, there's an idea of security and entrance, but it lacks tenure. So it has an instability in terms of people's desire to make something permanent, because they're likely to be evicted, and these are likely to be bulldozed any day. So this is the landscape that is rolled out during the apartheid housing strategies of the 1950s and 60s, and this is what the government today continues to roll out. It's really just a copy and paste of the same thing. It's far away from city spaces, and with the Lufring project, the brief was to design something that is not just the everyday RDP house. So an urban design strategy was developed, and there's a whole framework for schooling that is meant to come into this area: public transport, medium density housing, bonded houses. There's areas for work. There's areas for artisanal creation, small scale industry. But all of it has fallen flat. So about 2% of this project has been rolled out, and it's stuck. It's stuck in a bureaucracy where the plans are not approved. So these houses were built in 2010, and the city of Johannesburg has not been able to process the approval of these plans until this year, meaning that the people living here do not have title deeds. They do not have a legal right to add on to their buildings or to convert their buildings into income-generating asset. So this is a project that is a failure, but has many things that should be good. And I put this project out here as a question to myself and to all of you: is how much can we do as professionals within a world of the bureaucratic? We can maybe discuss at the end. But the concept behind this project is buildings close to a street, active surveillance, balconies, tight densities, large backyard spaces where people can grow plants and where children can play safely, and where the street is a space where people connect on a micro level. And this is the project when it was in its early completion. So the other reason I've put this project up here is because we were approached by the Museum of Modern Art in Louisiana to do an exhibition of this project. After it was finished, the Architectural Review published it, and it is somehow known in Europe. And they wanted to simply put it on display as housing, as housing in Africa that is doing something slightly different, that's looking at row houses and stoops, etc. And our response was no, you cannot exhibit this work without going back and looking how people are living, what people are using space for, how they've adapted, and how they've adapted within a context where there is no tenure of land. So what we did is we then worked with MoMA, and we did a post-occupancy study, which is very important for us because we still have links to the developer who has tried to get rid of us as architects because we fight about wanting to put balconies on, and we fight every time they want to push the house further away from the street and separate it out. There are many different typologies in this project, and they keep trying to erode them and make them fall away. So this is a very powerful study for us because it means that we can go back and we can see how people are using spaces. We can see the backyard rental structures that people are building for themselves despite these not being legal, despite them being an informal system. And we can see how houses become businesses, how this becomes a bar, a tavern in front of a house where someone makes and generates an income despite being on a margin of a city and despite being in a city that is never realized on an urban design plan level. The third and second last project that I want to share with you is a student residence. It's at the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, and it's a university. It's a student residence extension. So this is the university campus. It is completely walled off with very restricted access. It is in the city, but it is disconnected from the city. In this campus, there are a belt of residences here on this end of campus, and this is the Bernardo Home residence. It is a fortification. It was built in the 80s at a time toward the end of apartheid, where there was a great crisis and fear that the campus will be run riot with civil war and protest. So it's filled with these towers, and it is impenetrable except for one entrance. And we received a brief under an austerity measure to provide, under a massive need to provide student housing, to put as many beds into this residence as possible within a very tight means. So essentially, we were asked for a dumb box, and we scratched our heads for a while. We produced many options. We wondered about the fortification and eventually resolved to try and break open the space via a series of smaller, intimate courtyard spaces. You'll see when these come together. So this is very important. There's a lake nearby. There's a park here. There's a very old big tree. The students love to sit here. They have drinks there. They braai, and they cannot get from the building to the space. So we broke up, we created a secondary courtyard, we created a series of views through the building, and this is the lake, this is the view out. And then in that process, we then needed to develop and detail this dumb box, as I call it. So we worked with the local brick manufacturing company. They have a graveyard of bricks, the bricks under the tree that are specially commissioned, and these are the leftovers. They go to a site to waste away. And we managed to secure a very, very good price, cheaper than a stock brick that you plaster, for these bricks. And we developed a kind of weave, a weave that breaks, that matches yet breaks, that builds itself out of the condition of the fortress. So this is us on site. And these are the bricks. So we work one-to-one in the office. We develop details. We prototype details. There's a column detail that we developed. This is a drawing. We drew up many options on this facade, and we essentially wrap this building in a kind of blanket. And we love to work with models. We develop these models, and this was a very important thing to have produced because part of this project was about upskilling. And dealing with the need to reskill our community and ourselves, where we are untrained in the artisanal trades of bricklaying, woodwork, etc. This is Tebogo, you'll recognize him. He worked with us on the training process and on-site kind of workshopping of details and facades. And then we go back, we talk to students. So we got some feedback from students who found it very interesting to understand the story behind the brickwork. This is the first phase completed. We're still on site at the moment. These are some of the windows. They pop up slightly, and you have no idea how well, many of you might, but one has to fight so hard for a small intervention that allows you an extra view out of your room, an extra experience of a lake. You're living there every day in a 9 square meter room, and it's impossible to give that little bit extra under an austerity measure. So we're quite pleased with the courtyard and with the way we're seeing it being used. I think there needs to be some post-occupancy study as well. But this is a space that at its completion, it's filled up this year, so these were photographed toward the end, sort of at the completion of the project. But it's little things. It's a stable door at the entrance where someone can walk past and feel like they're not intruding when they're saying hello. So this is the second phase, taken this week, sent to me by the office, of the second phase going up. So you can see these two spaces, and there's incredible views out to the city from here. So we're very excited to see what happens when this is completed and how it's taken up. So I think these are just some dining halls around the residence. We worked at the neighboring dining hall, and again, we look at a kind of institutional space and a respatialization where you combine food and eating. This is the dining hall to Bernardo Home. So this is just a small side project in that. So these are all the residences on campus. This is a very interesting study for us. It looks at a square meterage square meterage per person. So this is a portfolio of their buildings, and we see Bernardo Hall, the original, sitting here. We see the majority of the building stock sitting here. This is a graph of student to square meter ratios, and we find a mean. The typical res that you build today will be about 26 square meters per person with all the facilities. And if you take this stock and you do something clever and you work optimally, you can move a building of this type to that level, and you can at the same time mediate all the challenges around that building. So the original buildings, 31 square meters per person. Our new intervention, 19 square meters per person, resulting in a 29 square meter saving that tries to address and open up the university. I mean, our dream is to take down the wall, and we hope to get there. So the new res is different. I think it allows you to socialize more with communal space, unlike the passages of Bernardo. Bernardo, you get lost in there. I've had nightmares. So the last project, I have no time, so I'm going to go through extremely quickly, is about occupying a suburb, a first-ring suburb of Johannesburg. We call it the 495 city because around Johannesburg there's a lot of sites that are all the same size and all have the same typology of a single-story standalone house. So 10 kilometer radius, we're looking at a massive portfolio of property that are all exactly the same. This is the kind of fabric that we get, and the town planning policies don't have any strategy to deal with, well, they're starting to develop strategies, but strategies to deal with the fact that people are building backyard structures behind these houses and renting them out because people need to make money. We have an unemployment rate of 40% in the 20 to 30 year age bracket in South Africa. So we are looking at typologies that fit on these stands. We've got 3, and we hope to unpack how they might be used to facilitate people creating a financial foothold in the property industry, so that it's not a big-scale development, but a small-scale development. So we have a duplex type where you can where people can essentially purchase or rent a unit, a 3-story unit, but if they purchase it, they can rent out various sections of it, and over time develop and build and eventually make it the whole thing their house as they move up within their own financial means as they develop and grow as people. So this is the duplex typology. I'm not going to talk too long about them. We have a micro-up typology that sits on there. And this is very much a typology that looks at sort of single room dwellings, a very big need in Johannesburg, and looks at how one can densify a site as much as possible, but still retain street interfaces, connections through balconies, and the opportunity of shops on a ground floor or sort of work from home units on a ground floor. And the final typology that we are looking at is a incremental growth strategy where you take a single-story house and we work with what is already being built, sort of backyard structures that then can grow and multiply over time to establish a street that interface, a building that interfaces with the street, that empowers someone who has access to an old house that's falling apart and that they can build over time. So this is a very short video by one of the students from the University of Johannesburg that I worked with in 2017 on her idea of how you can grow a suburb and build where these internal spaces become courtyards and memories and traces of what used to be, where windows that once looked out look in, and that cater for a community to connect and socialize and live and thrive. These are all the potential opportunities of these three prototypes, and these are some of the life worlds that we can imagine in these prototypes. I won't go into this too much. This is just a workshop on the same project that we ran at the University of Pretoria, and it's a workshop that we are paralleling here within São Paulo this week. So I'm completely out of time, but I think this is the city we dream of. We dream of a city where people can connect, where people can work, where they can play, where they can grow, where they can love, where they can release their tensions, and where they can thrive and build themselves. Thank you.